Very good to see you. Well, Britain fights terror better, is stronger and will be more prosperous within the European Union. The view not just of the British Prime Minister, but of the President of the United States, Barack Obama, in London this week, and 8 former US Treasury Secretaries. Do the views of foreign leaders count for anything in this debate? What do you think? Did people pay attention, but does it change votes?
Well, there are foreign leaders and there are foreign leaders, and I probably the publicly stated view, much more directly than expected, of the President of the United States probably does count for something. And I think the easiest way to judge that is to see the response of some of the leading lights, and I use that word advisedly, of the Brexit campaign, like Boris Johnson, for instance. And there's almost a panic and a nastiness. I mean, when you get to the point of sounding like Donald Trump with a British accent and sort of the birthing move, whether he was born in the United States, whether Kenyan ancestry makes him dislike the United Kingdom, that's both desperate and slightly ugly. I mean, yesterday Boris said, for instance, I think, that as a kind of preemptive strike, that Obama talking on Brexit is incoherent, irrelevant, and hypocritical. And this from a guy who won the Nobel Prize for hypocrisy over the last several months, because he had been going around Europe as mayor of London, extolling the value of the British financial services industry, et cetera, within the European Union. So will it have a dramatic effect? Probably not, but I think it will have some effect, and some of the early surveys show that particularly among younger voters, there's an openness to Obama saying what he thought on this, and that it will make a difference. And then just one final small point. There is always the argument against intervention politically, because this isn't an American issue, it's a British vote, all patently true. But as Obama himself pointed out, one of the main arguments of the Brexit campaign is that there is this shining city on the hill, probably somewhere near San Francisco, and that once you're out of Europe, you will have this wonderful, new, even more special relationship with the United States. And I thought he was very good in which, by simply remarking that it might make sense to hear from the President of the United States whether that's a fantasy or not. Well, and the final great touch was using the British word queue instead of line.
Well, I mean, there's those who say, we'll pick up the thing about the critics in a minute, but there are those who say, Nigel Farage is one who said that the use of the word queue shows it was all really written by Downing Street. He was doing what David Cameron wants him to do, which is as if there's a kind of union of existing leaders and they kind of all work together.
Well, I mean, that's...
And it's hypocritical because he would never dilute America's sovereignty in this way.
But that's just a pretty foolish thing to say. That's said by somebody who's never been involved in any event of this sort. What happens is that before the press conference takes place, the advisors are meeting, they're going over what the questions are likely to be, what the answers are going to be, and if at some point an American started talking about you have to go to the back of the line, somebody would have said, well, actually, wait a minute, we probably shouldn't use the word line, we need to use the word queue, because that's the word that is operable in this country. So that I would just dismiss out of hand. This was not done for David Cameron. It will help David Cameron, but it was not done for him. It was done for the United States, and I think that's what Obama made so perfectly clear, is that it was an intervention. We don't normally do these things, but this is a friendly intervention. And he's saying, in a sense, I'm warning you, don't do this. This is not good for us, the United States. It's not good for the transatlantic relationship. It's not good for the world. And it also happens not to be good for you, the United Kingdom.
I think we were all struck by how blunt he was about trade, and this go to the back of the queue, because that really, when he talked about the special relationship in really quite glowing terms, it was a personal relationship, a cultural relationship. I love the Queen, all that kind of stuff, which warmed some people's hearts. But when he was talking about trade, it was pretty hard-headed. You opt out of the big league, you opt out of the big league was effectively what he was saying.
It was blunt, and it was also refreshing, because the Brexit and the Remain campaign over the past few weeks has become kind of centered around the visceral, emotional aspects of leaving or staying. And I think it was refreshing to hear Obama just cut through all these hysterical kind of positionings and say, look, it's about hard facts, it's about trade, it's about money, it's about priorities, and also kind of saying, I'm not going to be sticking around, the kind of the subtext of it was, I'm not sticking around for a long time, so I have no skin in the game. I'm just telling you what's good for you and your potential relationship with America trade-wise in the future. But what I found really fascinating is everyone talking about the kind of erosion of sovereignty and U.S. intervention, and on the back of a state-celebrated birthday for a monarch. And I was like, have I been beamed back to Saudi Arabia suddenly over the past 48 hours?
I don't think our British monarch is quite the same as the House of
Well,
Saud.
I
think we could discuss the differences in great length later.
Yes, later. But there was just a kind of slightly petty, insecure underdog edge to the reaction to Obama. Strong countries with strong sovereignty don't react that way when people give them helpful advice.
But do you, at this point, I mean, we can talk about some of the trivial froth around this, but the key point that is being made is, by some, including Boris Johnson, is that he would never do this. That's why Mr. Johnson said it was hypocritical, because the idea of an American diluting American sovereignty in the way in which the British have by being part of the European Union. I mean, what do you make of that argument, given there's obviously fairly profound differences between the United States, a continental power 3,000 miles away, and Britain, an offshore island of Europe? I mean, there's that difference.
Absolutely, and it's insecurity. It's to kind of even to pose that comparison is ridiculous. And in a way, what Obama said felt undermining, because he was suddenly making that point, is that you can't really go it alone. You're not the US, and if you want the US relationship that gives you that special strength, you need to stay in.
It's interesting, just to pick up on the insecurity thing, yesterday on BBC Radio, Dominic Raab, the Justice Minister, a kind of off-brand discount Boris Johnson when it comes to the Brexit campaign, took great exception to the comparison of sharing internal sovereignty among individual American states. That is to say that you have these 50 states that pool their sovereignty, often don't like what Washington is doing, but they don't secede. And Dominic Raab's response, which picks up on your point, was, what are we, North Dakota? And I think there is this kind of sensitivity, because the obvious answer is, well, you could be California, which has almost the same size economy as Britain, and that it is a huge difference of scale.
I want to give the debate a slightly different angle, not to be a devil's advocate, but to say that something has to be said in favor of these arguments swirling around sovereignty. Obama takes the American interest view, big bloc relations and so forth, international order and stuff like that. I don't think he has enough of an understanding how much this sovereignty issue worries people in this country. Now, Europe isn't quite the beacon of democracy, or the European, the Brussels framework, the beacon of democracy that people in America might lead to the world to believe. Europe has things to answer for its democracy deficit. And also this admonishment to, by all means, stay with Europe. It is the area of lowest growth in the developed world. And there is something to be said that people are worried, should we stay in a community, European community, which has such a sort of imperiled future ahead of itself.
I mean, those are fair arguments.
Those are absolutely fair arguments. The problem, and I agree with the notion that the level of debate, if you can even call it that, has been disturbingly low, at the beginning of this campaign. But all of those are valid questions. The problem, just intellectually, with the Brexit campaign, at least from my perspective, is that you have all these shining city on the hill speeches, but there's no answer to how getting out of Europe would actually improve
For example, if 50% of your trade is with Europe, leaving Europe doesn't solve the problem of Europe's growth.
But the point is made that they still want to buy stuff from us, and we would still want to buy French cheese and wine.
I'm sure that's absolutely true. I think Obama's point is that you're stronger together, basically, and those arguments that you're making, Thomas, they're perfectly good. However, I think there's this thing at the bottom of everything which goes to the insecurity question. There's a kind of nostalgia, a romanticism among the kind of Brexit crowd, that yearning for something that is history. It's gone.
That's true of some people. Other people, I mean, there's two cases being made. There's a negative case, and let's go back. But there's actually a lot of people who want to get out of Europe who do say things would be a lot better.
Yeah, but
whether you agree with it or not, they do say that.
I think it's a valid.
I've talked to many optimists about the future of Britain.
But that's the key point. In other words, the rhetorical weapon that is deployed in this campaign is optimism. And the problem is, these are really tough decisions, and it's one of these decisions you can't go back on. And the only thing I would say generally, and I will be very quick, is the problem isn't sovereignty vis-a-vis the EU, for instance. The problem is that in the real world, the economy and the political system and the world we live in the early 21st century, there is no such thing for even the 5th largest economy in the world as absolute sovereignty. No country, even the United States, has sovereignty over everything.
Well, certainly not.
So it's
Well,
a
the
question
Brexiteers will
of,
accept that because you're a member of NATO, and then NATO also you subject part
And
of
the
your
World
sovereignty.
Trade Organization.
Globalization,
But you know, one
world
thing we
trade,
forget, if it's so dangerous because the Brexiteers can't describe the world outside Europe once it happens, how can Obama then predict that Britain will be at the end of the queue? That is another prediction that a president who's come to the end of his term.
but that's very much in the gift of it. Oh, you mean for a future American president?
He's on the way out.
To me,
He's
he's
one
on
of
the
the
way
ways.
out.
But
It's Project Fear, in
Fair
a
enough,
sense.
fair
It's
enough.
Project Fear.
you made the case to be very sceptical about Europe, and
Right.
but why is it then that in response to Obama we are hearing things like he is on the way out, so he doesn't count so much. He's half Kenyan. It's hypocritical. He moved a bust of Churchill because he doesn't really regard Britain very well. And this was a speech written by Number 10. In other words, the substance that you've addressed is not really the substance that we've been hearing
Which
in
is
the last
quite
24
amazing.
hours.
The responses to the Obama speech have been absolutely horrendously trivial, piffle, to use Boris Johnson's favourite word in many ways, to get hung up on hypocrisy. Obama is simply expressing an American viewpoint, and he's entitled to it, my goodness me, and hypocrisy doesn't come in. And also the issue that somehow Europe, is so weak you have to get out by hook or by crook. It's also over the top. But you have to take this situation seriously. That come what may, once Britain is out, there's a new world. Nobody can predict what will happen. Obama says we are linked at the hip. The two countries were so friendly. So how can he predict that you will be relegating Britain to the end of the queue?
Nesri?
I think if there were a neutral person trying to decide whether they were for or against, the response to the Obama statement would be troubling, because you would think this is not a Leave campaign that is based on cold, hard, rational fact. It is a campaign that is reactionary and reacting to Obama statements because they feel they are belittled, and it feels like the United Kingdom is a country that is powerful, and to point out that it would be less powerful outside of Europe implies that we are a weak state. And I think that the final statement was a beautiful metaphor where he says, no man is an island, even an island as beautiful as this, I think really spoke to that, which is you think you are this wonderful, special British Empire, but not even you can go it alone, not anymore.
But the notion of a weak state can be turned around by saying that if Europe is to be a weak bloc of nations, how can Britain's power be augmented in a set of nations?
Well, I mean, to answer the specific thing about anticipating whether Britain would or wouldn't be at the end of the queue, and obviously we don't know who will be the next president of the United States, but if you just crunch the numbers, and as Obama said this morning, doing trade deals is not easy. If you had a choice of doing a trade deal with Britain, albeit the 5th largest economy by GDP in the world, and a market of 500 million people with a gross GDP of almost exactly the same as the United States, which would you do first?
So the two
I mean, it's
countries
just
are
logical.
talking at cross purposes. It's quite true what you said economically and as far as trade is concerned. But when it comes to prosperity in the future and the weakness of the EU economy, of the euro area, for example, the argument of Britain becoming stronger in a weakening Europe has a lot of doubters.
We've got a couple of minutes left in this. I just want to pick up a point that you made it quite clear. You were very critical of Boris Johnson there. I just wondered whether you feel in this campaign Mr. Johnson has proved the most effective leader of the campaign, or whether there are other people who have the same views as him who may have expressed it in a way which is better put.
Well, the thing is, he's this magnet, giant, fluffy magnet for publicity. I mean, it gravitates to him. He is, in that sense, a bit like your friend Donald Trump. I'm just kidding. But really, one thing that has happened ever since Boris has been put more at the head of this campaign, he really has not done himself any service. He's become a figure of fun, and to become a figure of fun, if you aspire to be leader of a party, or certainly leader of the country, the prime minister, you're not in good shape. He just hasn't switched gears. He doesn't seem to be able to raise his game, as they say.
That's the thing. I think it's been bad for the campaign and bad for Boris himself, because what people say about Boris is that, you know, it's all an act, and one day when it's all serious and the chips are down, he's going to basically reveal this kind of intelligent, sort of intelligent.
About Trump too. Once he's president, he'll be,
but with Boris, you know, people say don't write him off. It's just an act. One day when things get real, he's going to rise above everything and expose his intelligence and his edge. And either he is that and has failed to do it, or he has done this kind of buffoonery.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.